Ever felt like you're just drowning in information when you're trying to get your head around a new topic? It can be, well, a bit much, right? That's exactly why we do the deep dive. Think of it as your shortcut. We pull out the really important bits, the nuggets of knowledge, so you can get properly informed fast. Today, we're embarking on this really fascinating journey into the world of wildflowers. We're pulling our insights straight from a brilliant chapter in Barbara Damrosch's The Garden Primer. And our mission really is to demystify wildflower gardening, make all that dense info feel, accessible, practical, and genuinely useful for you. It doesn't matter if you've got a single pot in the dorm room, a little balcony space, or you're just keen to connect with nature sustainably wherever you happen to be. This is for you. And here's kind of a surprising lesson right off the bat. We often hear, look to nature for gardening advice, right? But you absolutely cannot assume wild plants just take care of themselves. That's the twist. This deep dive is going to show you that, yeah, successful wildflower gardening is still gardening, proper gardening. But the rewards, they're incredible and very natural.
It's really about finding that balance, isn't it? That critical balance. Nature, yeah, it provides the basic conditions, sets the stage, you could say. But it's the gardener who, as Damrosch puts it, gently changes her mind. You're actively cultivating the beauty you want. I mean, think about it. You could intentionally create this lovely little woodland scene with foam flower. Or if you just let nature run wild without any input, you might end up with, burdock or some other aggressive weed taking over. It really pushes back against that common idea that you can just scatter some seeds and poof, instant wildflower meadow, zero effort. Doesn't quite work like that.
Okay, so let's unpack some of those common misunderstandings. What isn't wildflower gardening? First thing, It is definitely not gardening with weeds.
Right, and that's a really crucial difference for any gardener, beginner or not. I mean, sure, both weeds and wildflowers grow wild. But a weed, well, it's basically just a plant you don't want where it is. Simple as that.
All right.
And what's interesting and often overlooked is that loads of the really troublesome weeds, the pests, they aren't even native here. They got introduced, maybe accidentally, maybe not, and without the natural checks and balances, the insects, the diseases they have back home, they can just go rampant. The chapter really emphasizes this. The best wildflowers for your garden are native. Not just to the country, but ideally native to your specific local area, your local indigenous species. Why? Well, they're usually easier to manage. They fit into the local ecosystem better.
Makes sense.
And you can often actually go out and see them growing nearby, see what kind of conditions they like. That tells you a lot about how to care for them.
Okay, and here's another point, a really sobering one that ties right into living more sustainably. Wildflower gardening is also not digging plants up from the wild. Most plants you dig up from the wild, they just die.
Yeah.
They get transplant shock. Or, the time when they look prettiest, all in flower. That's usually the absolute worst time to try and move them. And even if you try moving them when they're dormant, some have these incredibly specific needs. Soil type, moisture levels, even like microorganisms in the soil.
Yeah, like the Pink Lady's slipper example, it needs a specific fungus to grow. You can't just replicate that easily at home unless you're a real expert. It's super tricky.
So why do people do it, and what's the bigger picture here, ethically?
Well, the really critical reason not to dig them up is that many species are actually becoming endangered because people dig them up. Even plants that seem common can be depleted locally, and sometimes it's nurseries doing it, collecting from the wild instead of propagating plants themselves. It's a big problem.
Wow.
So the most responsible thing for a beginner, really for anyone, is to start with species that are known to be easy to grow, adaptable. Buy them as seeds or as live plants from nurseries you trust. Or if you get really into it, joining a local native plant society is fantastic. They often have seed exchanges or share divisions of plants. It's sustainable and supports local conservation efforts.
Got it. Okay, another myth to bust. Wildflower gardening is not maintenance-free. I think loads of people fall for that, right? The plant and forget dream, especially if they want that natural look.
Definitely.
And yeah, it's often low maintenance compared to, say, a formal rose garden. But it is not no maintenance. In nature, plants sort of come and go, populations shift. But if you want a cultivated garden space, even a wild-looking one, to thrive consistently, you'll still need to do some weeding, mulching, maybe feeding occasionally, just to make sure your chosen plants survive and stick around.
Exactly. If you connect the dots, wildflower gardening, fundamentally, it's a lot more like conventional gardening than many people realize. You're still buying plants or starting seeds. You're preparing the soil, planting them carefully, weeding out the competition, adding mulch, watering when needed, all the usual stuff to keep them happy and productive, knowing that up front. It saves a lot of potential disappointment,
I hear
leads
you.
to much better results.
Right. So if it's not those things,
Mm-hmm.
what is it? And what about this idea of naturalizing versus wildflower gardening? Is there a difference?
Good question. There's a subtle but important difference in intent, I think. Wildflower gardening usually focuses more specifically on cultivating native plants for their ecological value, their suitability to the local climate, that sort of thing. Naturalizing, on the other hand, is maybe more about creating an aesthetic, an informal, wild look. And that look can definitely include native species, but it might also use non-native plants or even garden hybrids. Think about drifts of spring bulbs like daffodils or some of the fancier bee balm cultivars. The chapter actually says quite clearly there's no reason to be a purist if a particular hybrid plant is just a really good, reliable performer in the garden.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it gives you flexibility, you know. You can get that lovely, informal, natural vibe using a wider palette of plants, even if you've only got a container or a small balcony space. You're not strictly limited to just local natives if the look is your main goal.
Okay, this next point really changes how you might think about soil, and it feels like a real game changer for success with wildflowers, especially if you're dealing with, say, pots or small areas. Unlike traditional gardening, where maybe you try to amend everything to create one good soil type.
Right, that sort of lowest common denominator approach.
Exactly. Wildflower gardening is much more about understanding and working with what Damrosch calls small microenvironments.
And the smartest thing you can possibly do, truly, whatever size space you have, is to just observe your local environment. Pay attention. If you can, wander through local parks or even just look closely around your neighborhood, get a decent field guide maybe, and notice where native plants are thriving. Are they basking in full sun? Tucked away in part shade? What's the soil like? Does it stay damp? Does it dry out super fast? Is it rocky, sandy? And this is key. What company do they keep? You often find plants naturally growing together because they like the same conditions. These companion plants usually look great together too.
Ah, so you're basically becoming a nature detective in your own area.
Pretty much. It's the absolute best way to figure out how to match the right plant to the right spot you have available. Even if that spot is just, one end of a window box versus the other, it makes success so much more likely.
Okay, let's apply that. How can you create different feels or environments in small spaces? What about getting that woodland garden vibe? Say you've got a corner that gets dappled shade, maybe just from a building or a single shrub.
Yeah, you can absolutely create that feeling. Woodlands themselves are super diverse, right?
Yeah.
Plants adapted to all sorts of subtle differences in soil and light. A lot of the magic in woodland gardens comes from spring ephemerals. Plants like Virginia bluebells or bloodroot. They pop up early, flower in that spring sunlight before the trees fully leaf out, and then often they just vanish underground until next year.
Like a little seasonal show.
Exactly. It's like the forest floor is this dynamic stage, constantly changing. And you can definitely recreate that feeling, even in miniature, in a pot. You're essentially making a tiny self-contained micro-woodland.
So if you're picturing this for a small space, maybe a container, how do you translate those elements?
Well, instead of clearing a big area, you'd choose maybe a larger container. You mimic the light by putting it in a suitably shady spot, or maybe even use a taller plant in the same pot to cast some shade on smaller ones below it.
Okay.
For the soil, in a container, you'd want a good, rich, but well-draining potting mix. If it's a small patch of ground, maybe dig in some compost or leaf mold to enrich it, make it more like that woodland floor.
What about preparing the planting area? Any tips there?
Yeah, you can adapt things. That newspaper trick Damrosch mentions for paths, you could do a mini version at the bottom of a large pot with a layer of cardboard maybe to help drainage and suppress anything underneath, then add your ricks. And mulch is important, even in pots. Shredded leaves work well, or fine shredded bark. Just the usual caution. Don't pile it up against the plant stems or crowns, let them breathe.
Right, don't smother them.
Exactly. Oh, and pine needles are great if you happen to be growing acid lovers, like maybe some types of violets or wintergreen.
In arranging the plants, even if it's meant to look natural, there's still some thought involved, right?
Absolutely. You want that informal feel, but it shouldn't look messy or accidental. Think about heights. Don't hide the short guys behind the tall ones. Look for interesting contrasts in foliage. Maybe something delicate and ferny next to a plant with broad, bold leaves, like Dutchman's breeches with Galax leaves. And try to visualize the color combinations as things bloom through the season. The aim is to create these lovely small pictures as you look at your pot or patch.
Like little vignettes.
Exactly. Imagine a little jack in the pulpit maybe poking up through some delicate maidenhair ferns, or some trilliums nestled beside a contrasting ground cover.
What are some good ground cover options for that woodland feel in a small space?
Well, bloodroot is lovely, though it disappears later. Mayapple has great foliage. Foam flower is fantastic, very reliable. Golden star, too. If you have plants that tend to spread vigorously, you can actually plant them inside smaller, unglazed clay pots first, and then sink those pots into your main container. It helps keep their roots contained.
Oh, clever. Like a pot-and-pot system.
Yeah, it works pretty well for controlling the spreaders. Other nice woodland options could be things like Canada lily, wild violets, maybe even partridge berry or wild ginger if you have the right spot.
Okay, so from that cool, shady woodland feel, let's switch gears completely. Let's talk meadows, that wide-open, sunny space. It's romanticized a lot, isn't it? But creating one, even a small one, has its own challenges.
It really does. That image of just scattering seeds into an existing lawn or field and getting a beautiful meadow, it really works out that way.
Why not?
While often those existing grasses are really vigorous, very competitive, they just outgrow the wildflower seedlings. Natural meadows are often quite complex systems that develop over time. So successful approaches usually involve starting from scratch, preparing bare ground and using specialized seed mixes. Often these come from nurseries that focus on prairie restoration type plantings. These mixes usually include native grasses that are known to coexist well with the flowers, but even then, it takes time, years usually, and it still needs maintenance, weeding, managing the grasses.
Okay, so maybe not the easiest starting point for a beginner or someone with limited space.
Probably not the full-scale meadow, no, but what works really well and is much more achievable is creating a mini meadow. This means establishing specific clumps or drifts of perennial meadow flowers, things like goldenrod, New England aster, maybe butterfly weed for drier spots, or gay feather if you have a slightly moister area, maybe turtlehead, bee balm, cardinal flower, joe pye weed. Beautiful plants.
So how do you do the mini meadow?
You'd basically prepare a small bed like you would for any perennial, remove the grass or existing weeds, improve the soil if needed, and then plant several plants of a single species together in a clump or drift, then mulch around them. It gives you that meadow feel without trying to replicate the whole ecosystem.
And maintenance for this mini meadow patch. Still need to weed.
Oh yeah. You'll still need to pull out unwanted things like burdock or thistles if they pop up.
Yeah.
For slightly larger mini meadow areas, you can even mimic natural cycles. Mowing the whole thing down once a year is recommended. But after the last flowers have finished blooming and set seed, that's important.
Okay.
And here's a great tip for supporting wildlife. Mow only half the meadow area each year, alternating sides. That way you leave refuge for overwintering insects, like butterfly or moth chrysalises that might be attached to the stems. It's a small action with a good environmental impact.
That's a fantastic idea. So meadows aren't static either.
Definitely not. They're always in flux, Damrosch says. They'll change from year to year. Plants will move around a bit. It's part of their charm, their dynamic nature. And again, if you want really specific advice for your region's meadow plants, those local native plant societies,
Great.
invaluable resource.
Okay, let's zoom in now on wildflowers for really specific conditions. This really gets into thinking sustainably, especially about water and tackling challenging spots, even within a single pot or balcony box. Dry areas first.
Yes, and this is where that principle of local knowledge and local plant sources is absolutely paramount, especially as the book notes in the drier parts of the American West. Trying to grow, say, dam-loving New England wildflowers out there, it's just not going to work well, and it's incredibly wasteful of water.
So, focus local.
Exactly. Focus on the amazing native species that are already adapted to those conditions. Think cactus blossoms, California poppies, stunning pentstemons, desert marigolds. There's a huge range of beautiful drought-tolerant natives out west.
And even if you don't live in a dry climate, this principle applies, right? Choosing drought-tolerant plants for those tricky spots we all have.
Absolutely. That super sunny windowsill that bakes in the afternoon, the pot on the balcony that gets blasted by wind, a south-facing slope. Using drought-tolerant plants there is just smart gardening. It conserves water and reduces your workload.
What are some good examples for those tougher spots?
Oh, things like blanket flower, Gaillardia is super tough. Gay feather, Liatris, again. Various salvias are brilliant, many asters, butterfly weed, brown-eyed Susans, prairie coneflower. Lots of really colorful, reliable choices.
Okay, opposite end of the spectrum.
Oh.
Wet areas, that soggy patch in the yard, or maybe just a planter that never seems to dry out.
Right. And the book makes a great point here. Your wet spot, whether it's properly boggy, marshy, or near a stream, or even just that perpetually damp container,
Hmm.
don't see it as a problem to be fixed or drained. See it as a valuable resource.
How so?
Well, these areas are often teeming with life. Frogs that eat mosquitoes, maybe nesting birds if it's a larger area. It's an ecosystem in itself. So the advice is don't drain it. Work with it.
So observe first, then add plants that fit.
Precisely. See what might already be growing there naturally, if anything. Then add species that like those conditions. But you need to understand their specific needs. Some plants, like blue flag iris, don't mind having their roots actually submerged in water for periods. Others, like maybe Canada anemone, just prefer soil that's consistently damp but not waterlogged. Still, others might need damp soil but want their roots free from dense competition, like swamp pink.
So it's nuanced.
Very nuanced. Good examples for damp spots could be meadow ruse, goat's beard, monarda, bee balm, vervain, even cattails if it's properly wet. Native sedges are fantastic. And ferns. So many ferns love moist conditions. Maidenhair fern, ostrich fern.
But be careful.
Yes. Be careful to distinguish between soil that's just consistently moist but still drains versus an area that's actually flooded or waterlogged for long periods. Different plants suit each. And a practical tip. Try not to walk on or compact wet soil too much. It damages the structure and can suffocate roots.
Good point. Okay, last specific condition. Rocky areas. Maybe you have a rock garden or just some stones on a patio or want to incorporate them into containers. Rocks are good.
Rocks are fantastic. They're an asset, definitely. They blend beautifully with plants. They provide texture. They can help highlight specific specimens.
How can you use them effectively, even in a small space?
Well, you can place taller plants behind a nice rock, so the rock provides a foreground, or maybe nestle a special little alpine plant right in front of a rock, using it as a backdrop. If you don't have rocks naturally, you can bring some in. Local stone usually looks best. The trick is to make them look like they belong, like they've always been there. Burying the bottom third or so in the soil helps achieve that. There's this lovely little story in the chapter about a friend, Bluey Peel. Her yard had these granite slabs mixed with grass, and Wildflowers, blue scilla, red and yellow wild columbine had just seeded themselves into the tiny pockets of soil in and around the rocks. It looked like a miniature alpine meadow. And Bluey apparently said, "God didn't do that. I did that," which just perfectly captures it, doesn't it? That active, satisfying partnership between the gardener and nature, creating beauty, even in these little niches. It's really rewarding.
That's a great image. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What does all this dense information really boil down to for you, the listener, wanting to bring more green into your life, maybe in a simple, sustainable way?
I think it comes down to a few core takeaways. First, observe nature. It really is your best teacher. See what thrives locally, understand the conditions, but remember, nature provides the palette. You're still the artist. Don't expect it to do all the work.
Right.
Second, source responsibly. This is huge. Buy propagated plants from reputable nurseries. Avoid wild collected ones. Join local plant societies for seeds or divisions. This is a direct, positive action you can take for conservation and sustainability. Third, match the plant to the site. This is probably the golden rule. Understand your specific microclimates, sun, shade, soil, moisture, even in a single pot. Get this right, and you save yourself so much effort and increase your chances of success dramatically.
Makes sense.
Fourth, remember, it's still gardening. Even wildflowers benefit from care. Thoughtful planting, weeding out bullies, maybe some mulch. They're not maintenance-free, but the maintenance is often less intensive and different in kind.
And finally,
Recognize that it's both sustainable and hugely rewarding. Choosing native plants supports local insects, birds, and the whole ecosystem. It often conserves water, especially if you choose drought-tolerant species for dry spots. And the result is this stunning, dynamic, natural beauty right outside your door or even on your windowsill. It's a connection to place.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If we really take the time to listen, truly listen, to what the land and its native plants are telling us, even in our own small patches of green, how much more vibrant, how much more resilient could those spaces become, and what unexpected joys might they bring us along the way? Thank you so much for joining the Deep Dive team for this exploration of wildflower gardening from the Garden Primer. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.